Welcome to the Unblocked Creators Podcast. I'm Jesse James Boys, and I will be interviewing artists of all kinds about overcoming creative resistance and about developing a sense of agency to cultivate a life full of meaning and purpose, and to overcome creative blocks and have a lot of fun, hopefully. So today I'm interviewing multimedia artist Ty Martens of Abbotsford, British Columbia, who is currently set up at a local gallery called Open Space, and he has his show is called Aptera. Right now he's mostly sculpting, but he's a multimedia artist who works with writing and various forms. So he's become kind of known around here for putting on gallery events of his own. This time he's hosted at another local gallery. So just before we get started, this is episode 3 of the Unblocked Creators. I'm still working out some technical details, learning how to use different editing software. I have some equipment that needs upgrading, so please forgive the audio quality. There was some difficulties to overcome with that, partly being the space was so full of echo, and my microphones had limited capacity to account for that. So thanks for your patience. Hope you're willing to check it out despite the imperfections in these first few episodes. I'm very excited to upgrade the gear and continue learning how to increase the overall production quality of these. So thanks for bearing with me, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Mr. Ty Martens, thanks for welcoming me to this space today.
Yeah.
Got a bunch of art on display, and I'm excited to talk to you about all kinds of projects you've worked on over the years. I'm speaking to my audience and interviewing artists for my audience about overcoming creative blocks, creative resistance, and just finding your way as an artist. So
Yeah.
we've had a lot of conversations over the years about creativity and about purpose and meaning, and overcoming the resistance to doing anything at all, much less creative work that often isn't necessarily supported or encouraged all around. And so yeah, thank you. And what's going on here? How did we end up here?
Yeah. So this is a sculpture series that I have been working on for about 7 months, and I'm lucky enough to get to show it at Open Space here. Yeah, so I had an opening event, and it's going to be on display until June. So yeah.
This place has been up and running for a while?
Yeah, this place has been up for, I don't know, maybe a year and a bit, maybe a bit more.
Okay.
But yeah, it's pretty great. It's like, no, they don't charge me anything. Basically, you just kind of get your foot in the door, and you can kind of book a slot. So it's pretty cool. It's like right downtown. Got the window. People have been just coming in, checking it out. So
yeah, this is amazing.
It's pretty great.
There's not enough things like this, so I'm excited to see everything that happens here.
Yeah.
Maybe I can get some of my woodwork.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of stuff's going on, like week to week.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have little events and comedy nights and like painting nights and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that it just lined up that last week's podcast was with Jack Hensby, and he had a show here. He had his paintings on display, and there was a bunch of stuff going on for a one-night event. And then that it lines up that I had you scheduled for the next one, and here you are set up for a month.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's sick. You're gonna have to move in here, I guess.
I guess my podcast is just people who show stuff here. Basically.
Yeah. Yeah, you just bag by the door.
To be on this podcast, you got to show stuff at Open Space Gallery.
Just a podcast where you just busk outside there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Good. The street podcast.
Yeah.
So these pieces, how much hot glue did you inhale in this process?
I think hot glue is the least of my concerns, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
A few chemical
encounters. A few different, a lot of spray
alien
materials.
Encounters? What's the who are you really working for? This whole thing?
I don't know if I can say. Yeah, I think it's a little too top secret.
Okay. Sorry, I should have asked you what's okay territory.
Yeah.
Conversation, but yeah. What's some of what's driven you to work with this kind of medium?
I've been doing sculpture for just only a few years, maybe about 3 years, and I think it kind of just keeps evolving um, about what kind of materials I want to use, what kind of textures I want to achieve, and feelings I want to evoke. But I guess it kind of started. Hmm. I think there's something about the three-dimensional side of sculpture that is really exciting and really hard to like mine the depths of because you can just it feels like every project or every piece is like a something I'm just like kind of like finding the boundaries of or kind of like etching out of the unknown sort of because I don't really work at a very most of these pieces except for the wings piece, they're like because like those ones came from a sketch, and I built those based on that sketch.
Yeah.
But everything else came from sort of like maybe like a gut instinct of like a shape or following a certain track for a certain amount of time, and then feeling that feeling where you're like this isn't quite it. Like yeah, it's good, and my friends are like oh that's cool, but for me I'm like oh it hasn't hit that like spot. And so they all kind of required this like rebirth at some point where they were ripped in half, some chunk was taken off, some style of it was like kind of reworked, and then they just result in something totally new that is exciting to me and that like I can continue to look at and be sort of like mystified by and feel like almost like I didn't really make it. So that sort of process has become like a big part of all of my mediums, and I think yeah, the origin of like me working with sculpture, um, it was a bit different at the time, but it was just like a fascination with like various materials and like um, I've never been one to really like sit down and hone a craft and like get really good at maybe a more traditional style of art. I like to dabble and like kind of like just kind of go in raw and then see what happens and then like find a voice through that rawness. And I've often felt like that's sort of like I've looked down at that at different points because obviously people get very wowed by like say like Connor or Jack Hensby where it's like they're so good at like manipulating paint and they can create something so impressive to look at like technically.
Yeah.
And I can't do that. I don't work, and I also don't work in a very like specific meaning way either. Like this series has a meaning and has like a theme, but it arose through the work rather than it coming at the outset. So yeah, I've kind of like started to accept the fact that like I work in a way that's more abstract, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer.
Yeah. No, that's good. What are your to we'll come back to this chapter, but can we rewind and surface some early memories of creativity and art?
Yeah.
What were the first experiences creating in your life?
Well, I would say like early on, um, drawing, copying like superheroes and trying to draw figures and stuff like that, and writing novels about like warrior mice and stuff like that, and like just kind of being fascinated by like different, I guess, like just things that I would consume, I guess, as a kid, and trying to like replicate those and like figure out like how I could be a part of that. Um, so yeah, say drawing and creating like pages and pages of books of like different aliens that me and my cousin would make and document.
Okay.
And stuff like that. So I was always creating like little worlds of things and like extravagant like board games with like tiny little cutout pieces that you would trade. Just a nightmare to play. Make my family play that stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, so just kind of like always doing little projects or stuff like that. But yeah, definitely doodling and drawing, like always doing something like that when I was little.
Okay. Yeah, you've experimented with a lot of mediums since then. So
Mm.
when did writing come in?
I would say I've been writing like on and off. Like I never, like I said, I still don't really hone crafts that much, for whatever reason. Um, but as a kid, I would write like what felt like really long chunks of like child novels and stuff like that. Just pages and pages seem like so much. If I were to look at it now and the size of my writing, it's probably, you know, probably a very small amount of actual material there, but felt like a grand thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was always writing since I was a kid, and then like as a teen, probably experimenting with like short stories and stuff like that, and kind of realized that maybe my attention span, and like patience for writing something really long, wasn't there. So I was like, okay, maybe shorter stories where I can be more like punchy and be more like, you know, I can manipulate the story in like more kind of dramatic ways without worrying about the consequences of like making sure everything's mapped out and everything checks out.
Okay.
And so that kind of led into like how I write now, which is like short vignettes generally, of just like absurd fiction and like
Yeah.
sometimes like gross out humor. And
Is it mostly through your the problem with Tim Johnson?
yeah,
That's most of your writing?
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I wrote one like novella that I made into a book with some other writing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, pretty much everything else is like, that's kind of like the channel for that. Just became a place where like, yeah, because I would start writing just like absurd comedy stories that made me laugh in my notes, and then needed a place for them.
Yeah.
And so then it was at like a point in my life where I really wanted to create platforms, because like I have a lot of creative energy, but I don't know, always like have what seems to me like a lot of purpose to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, okay, I love making stuff and I want to do stuff, and maybe I don't know what it's about, but like I need to produce something, and I can't produce it if it doesn't have a place to live.
Yeah.
So I started kind of developing like, I started thinking about projects in sort of like a platform type way. So basically just a place where it can live so that it can be executed and shared.
Right.
And then it can just be there, and people can see it or not or whatever. But that really helped me like maintain production, because it was like, okay, now I have a place for this ridiculous piece of bullshit writing to live, and I can just, you know, plop it there, and then people can see it, and that can grow, and now it's like a big like archive of ridiculousness.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so it incentivizes me to like add to it instead of it being like, oh, it's just another thing in my notes. It's like a big shift that really helps you like actually like finish something.
Yeah.
Even if it's a small little thing and it's not perfect, it's still like it gets to live somewhere and be a part of a larger thing. Yeah.
It lives somewhere. Yeah, yeah. So is that some of the mindset when you did Jawbone?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It's
It was about it being like a platform
magazine
for people. Yeah.
Yeah, there's do you have many copies of this around, or is it pretty distributed?
Well, I'm pretty bad at marketing and,
Yeah, well,
sharing stuff. So it's like,
tricky.
there's a handful of them out there and like, and stuff, but I still have a decent amount haunting me in my,
Yeah. Well,
my house.
Ty Martens art on Instagram or elsewhere.
Yeah, sure.
Copy of Jawbone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. So there's the writing. There's the there's the event. So you did 4 or 5 or 6 events over the past few years.
Yeah.
Organizing, bringing some other artists, local artists around with sculpture and painting and drawing.
Mm-hmm.
What was the seed of the first idea to do an event?
Well, I think the first one was Incoming, which you were a part of.
Yeah. I wasn't there, but my art was.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I would say like the seed of those events came from a long ways back of doing like weekly art nights at my house, my friends, through high school and stuff. But Incoming like was sort of, I would say, I got a really big, so it was part of like a platform building of like, I have a lot of friends that want to make art, but they're not making stuff. They don't have a reason to make. So let me just make one of those. And like, we can combine that with like a party hangout, like people can come have a good time. I was really into, at the time, still am, but less so, like blending art experiences with like casual settings because I have a lot of friends that like art and can engage with art. They're in that world, but I also have a lot of friends that don't, and I always have a desire to like make those people feel comfortable and be like, my art is like, it's you can't not express a part of yourself through whatever you make, but in another way, like my art is like deeply unserious, and so to make people, I don't know if that's true. It's like it's deeply serious, but it's very unserious on a lot of levels as well. And so then from that angle, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have some pretentious like gallery showing or to have some like art event where people feel like, oh, they need to like dress up. It's like, no, this is just about community and like being together and having a good time. And there's just also something awesome for you to see. Yeah. So that was very much like, I wanted to create the spaces and the platforms that I wanted to see in the world. And so, um, Incoming was like the first kind of iteration of that, where it was like I wrapped the whole house in fabric and like rugs and created rooms with fabric, and it was like my whole house was like an Afghan tent. It really came together. It was really cool, and there was 12 different artists that had a piece sort of in different sections and stuff.
Yeah.
And house didn't burn down, luckily.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was I think it kind of was born out of that desire to make just something like cool and like exciting and inviting with art where you can engage with it or you don't have to. It's like it's not about you sitting there and having some deep thought about this art.
It's scratch your chin and make
Exactly.
comments about
Yeah.
it. Yeah, that's cool because when I had probably been to maybe two or three of your events by the time um, my landlord a couple of years ago when I was living in Chilliwack, Richard Weeb, he had built this wild place, the Rusty Shovel, and asked me if I knew some musicians. So I got the boys from Turquoiser to
Mm-hmm.
come around, and then some visual artists like Jack Hensby, Connor Cowanhoven, and got them to put their art on display. And so I put out a big invite list and said, uh, $10 or whatever is the fee to come and see this concert show and hang out at the Rusty Shovel.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty successful. A bunch of people came, and it was just an absolute blast. It was so much fun, and the music was great. And people gave me credit, and thanks Jesse so much. And really, like, I didn't build the place. I put out phone calls and messages to get people signed up, and artists were grateful to put their work on display, and they came and put their stuff on display. The band got set up and rented equipment. So it wasn't a lot of, I put work into helping set up
Mm-hmm.
and lots of details, but it really just came together, and it did feel that same sort of way where no one on the invite list, it didn't matter if anyone had some deep appreciation for impressionist art or funk music, or it's just going to be a fun time. And
Yeah.
so that was a blast. And then, I also probably wouldn't have done my at-home event if it wasn't for that experience and probably seeing some of your stuff.
That's cool.
And Ritual Madness
Mm-hmm.
transformed my home space, and you put your piece. What was it?
The stock.
The stock was there.
Yeah.
One of your sculptures, and there was Jack Hemsby with paintings, and my mom's paintings, and my carved coffee table, and other wood carver, and then Keaton Sauter playing music, and it was so much fun. It was like 5 weeks of kind of planning and preparing my space and making sure all the artists. I think I had 8 people. Making sure everyone was ready on time and had their stuff there. Which day is it again? And what time should I be there?
Yeah, working with artists, Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a funny thing being in like the business of art Not that I made any money off of this event. It's just the fact that it's like being the action taker who makes a thing happen.
Yeah.
Is very different than the attitude behind a lot of people just creating art.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting bridge to be that bridge.
Yeah.
Between like the creative process and creative people and kind of marketing or actually showcasing.
Yeah.
Being resourceful to get it on display.
Yeah.
Give it a place to live.
Mm-hmm.
So I admire that. I think it's something I've had fun doing because I recognize that a lot of really talented artists they just almost don't have it in them to like really push their stuff.
Yeah.
And get it seen. And I don't either. Like,
yeah.
I've been doing all this woodworking and, you know.
Yeah, I'm terrible at it as well. Like, I just don't like, I just have such a difficult time with like Instagram and like sharing it. And I mean, like, there's a whole conversation there about that and about like, you know, how many eyes and like do you really want to have on what you're doing? Mm-hmm. And like, what does like making it as an artist really mean for you? And what exact type of making it are you trying to go for? And I think like those are really important questions to ask.
Did you read my script before we started?
No.
I
can't read.
No, I want to know more about the answer to those questions for you. Like what at this point, because also as I mentioned over the years, we've talked about, you know, meaning and fulfillment, and both of us came from origins of having religious beliefs and having that kind of meaning imposed on our worldview, and then leaving that behind and sort of being left out in the desert with, you know, a blank piece of paper to draw a map on. Mm-hmm. And you know, I experienced depression growing up for sure, and then just existential despair, sort of. You realize we're thrown into this insane situation. Yeah. And if you acknowledge how mysterious it really is, and you know how uncertain everything is, the future of my health and the inevitability of my death. And, yeah. All of that's kind of heavy. Yeah. So what is it that brings you meaning in life, and what about as an artist? What does it mean? What does success mean to you? What's worthwhile? Yeah. I'll start with the second half of the question. Success, I feel like for me, I mean, I'm willing to let it kind of like change over time because it has already. And I don't have like the answers. But for me, there's so many questions within each like stance that you can take. So, you know, it's kind of just like how deep do you go on each point. But for me right now, success is like, in a lot of ways, like completing a project. Success is like growing in like a medium or experiencing on a deeper level, like it's tapping into flow in like whatever medium I'm doing. That's when I like what I've made the most. That's when I have the most fun. I'm always seeking to like find that flow state in whatever I'm doing, where I'm not the one that's really dictating what's going on. I'm just like, it's just flowing out of me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's like creative force. I don't like labels, so I don't really know what it is, and I don't feel like adding like spiritual language to it. But whatever that is, it's something like that where, you know, you're kind of just a vessel for something that flows through you, some sort of like just energy. Yeah. And whether that's even just all coming from me and I'm just like putting my analytical mind aside and like allowing my hands to do it. The more that you do that, the more that you can trust that those things will come, and then the more you get to like explore new ideas and new results that are exciting to you, rather than being, you know, you got everything hemmed in and perfectly organized, so you know exactly what's going to happen next, and now you just got to fill in all the gaps. Like,
That's like a nightmare to me. Like, I don't know how novelists
It
do
kind of
that.
actually seems like the way that you experience your definition of success or fulfillment as an artist has been more about removing definitions of result oriented success.
Yeah.
Metrics.
Yeah. But then like the results still happen. They just aren't the focus.
Yeah.
And like, yeah. So
the process.
Yeah, the process is over the last like year I've kind of adopted this mindset of like 90-10, and 90 is the process and 10 is sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime I'm in the process and I get caught up in like, what will people think of this? Is this gonna work? Should I put it on Instagram? Is this like does this work as like a standalone thing, or is this, or just anything that you start to like take a step back and you're looking at it and you're like, um, okay, I'm no longer actually engaging with like the process of this. And like you might say that's still process, but it doesn't feel like process. It feels like you're being removed from the present. And so like for me, anytime I do that, I start to think like, okay, I'm still in the 90% here. I still need to like just engage with what I'm doing and like just keep like pushing for that like flow state zone. And so then once you complete the project, then in your imaginary criteria, you've already hit 90%.
Mm-hmm.
That's a flying pass. And so then when the event comes or whatever, when you share it and you feel maybe like anxious about it, or you feel vulnerable about it, or maybe you have self-doubt, or no one shows up or anything, that's just 10%. Like worst case scenario, you fail the 10%, you still got 90%.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit of like, specifically some specific goalposts but it helps my mind like stay focused on like what has turned out to be what matters for me in like the process, because it's a lot of fun like having moments where you're engaging with the material or whatever you're doing, and you have moments where you're like, oh wow, that was like, I flipped the whole thing upside down and all of a sudden I found it, or I wasn't thinking about what I was writing at all. I was just letting it come out, and I got this like hilarious thing.
Yeah.
And now I can kind of come in and like dial it in. But like, yeah, finding that sort of like the results of flow is sort of the crux of like what I'm trying to do with different mediums now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the more you do that, the more you trust it. So the more you can like manufacture it a little bit. And you can't like control flow, but you can set up the environment for it to come about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I've been studying a little bit of like scientific theory on flow, and one of the main things just seems to be that you're pushing at the edge of the known and the unknown. You're not bored because you're not doing things that are just known and easy,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not overwhelmed or anxious because you're not analyzing with a perfectionistic attitude about the result and trying to do something that not sure if you can. You're more so just engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Total engagement.
Yeah.
No self-consciousness.
Right.
So yeah, it makes me think a big part of that is what blocks people creatively is that kind of state of constant evaluation.
Yeah.
Measuring.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And bringing yourself into it.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you set up that environment to get yourself out of it?
It's kind of like different versions of the same thing, I feel like, for different mediums. Essentially, it's kind of just like self-talk. That's like, I think with writing and drawing, it's way easier than sculpture, which makes sense because I do like, if you were carving something, then maybe it would be a similar thing because you're working with like one material. But I work with like, there's a myriad of items on these things that I need to find the place of where it goes. I need to like feel out how something is feeling with a certain material. I need to take big risks, and those things look a little different, but under a similar. It's just harder to like stay in that zone with sculpture because of the constant decision making with various items. So it's very challenging to do that.
Yeah.
Depending on what part of the process I'm in. But with writing and drawing, it's like you can just kind of go. So like I've been drawing a lot lately, and the most fun, the part of the process that I look forward to the most is just the loose sketching of the shapes at the beginning, where I completely trust my hand. I'm not trying to create any shapes. I inject little bits of like analysis into it, but like generally I try and basically just not think.
Yeah.
And just trust the flow of like the pen. And then same with writing, it's like as soon as I'm like, oh, okay, what do I want to write about? I go, like, you've already made your first mistake. Like,
right.
Now other people do it totally different, but for me personally, it's like I want to like create something like raw that just comes out, and then splice in different parts of the process. But like I want to create like the meat of like the project from I guess some ways like my unconscious.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't think about it like that very much, but like that's probably what's happening.
Yeah.
It's just like I wanna get that lump out, and because that's like the most fun part is like, oh, what is it gonna be? Like what's gonna come out of it? And then
evaluating mind can always come back in later.
Exactly. So I think like to get the raw idea, like the skeleton of the idea from that, and like sometimes it looks more like typical flow, and sometimes it's more just like I am in and out of analysis, but I'm constantly like thinking like, oh, because like analysis makes us like anxious, right? Like it makes you tight.
Yeah.
And like you can't create loose ideas, and like you can't tap into like dark, strange ideas.
Yeah.
When you're like
you make everything very one-sided.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just basically make sure I let myself stay loose and have complete non-judgment about what I'm making and take big risks.
Okay.
Yeah.
To overcome some of that being sidetracked by all the many decisions involved, it's about willingness to take risks and being non-judgmental of your own process.
Yeah.
So, playing.
Yeah.
So really, like, I think what's coming through in this conversation for me is that probably most of what blocks people creatively is like feeling like they don't have permission to play.
Yeah.
Because they have to live up to some standard or ideal.
Yeah.
Which really, what the hell is that about? Like,
right.
What's the point of art?
Yeah. I think a lot of that comes down to people not really, or at least one angle is like people not really investigating what they're doing it for, and also what they think their goals are with creating art, because they're caught up in like, which is totally fair, like, the internet zeitgeist of like, oh, here's the person that you look up to and they're making, reels about how to draw, and they're like obviously super talented, or, they're just like, oh yeah, if you just do this and you do this and you'll make it, and you got like 6 million followers or something, and you're like, immediately your brain's just like, oh, that's what I want. And if you never question that and figure out all that goes into that, and how maybe you should actually just find your own path, then you're going to stay locked in that, and you're going to create all of these like, boxes that you keep yourself in, and you will definitely not enjoy making art, and your art will feel very tight and very one note. And I think also sometimes people, they can create something really good, like they have a really good voice in something, and then they get some success in that, and then they're like locked into that.
Yeah.
And that's
what I do now.
Yeah, and they don't even like doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not playing,
Right.
So I think for me, like, I fundamentally think that art is playing. I mean, like, it takes different forms, but like it's that's kind of what it is. Like, it's about like expression. Even if you don't know what you're trying to say, it still comes out. And it's about um, releasing like energetic and creative energy.
Yeah.
Said that terribly, but you know, I don't know. I don't have like a hard line definition of it, but I don't think that it really comes. I think as soon as it starts to come in contact with like money and career and expectations and like hard like social media, uh, I guess parameters or whatever, it starts to like get a little bit diminished.
Yeah.
At least for me.
What was your experience like? You went to school for a while and studied graphic design.
Yeah, just a diploma.
So, did you feel like that was much leverage or scaffolding for you, or was it kind of stifling?
As far as like how it
Skill wise and creatively.
yeah, I would say skills wise it was awesome because it wasn't like the greatest schooling and like it got hit by COVID. So, I learned some skills for sure that allowed me to pursue graphic design projects um, in my own hackneyed way, which I do really enjoy, but I have hangups about that at times. But I learned a lot of skills and like it really helped me to kind of create like cool visuals for my projects. Um, and so like it was definitely worth doing, but it did also show me how it kind of like brought some of my feelings about social media and commercial art to the surface and really like put me in a situation where I felt like the black sheep sort of and had to kind of like stand up for what I believed in a space where it's like, okay, well then why are you here? So like, it took you this long to kind of like wrestle with the fact that like social media and marketing are big parts of like what you're trying to do, but you don't even want to do them. So it's like, so yeah, it kind of put me in a position where it solidified those beliefs in a lot of ways and showed me that like I really just want to like explore creative freedom. And it was basically just like what not to do in a lot of ways for me, which I think is like art school for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But luckily it was like a specific, a very very specific like sect of like art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you feel like you gained much design sense from that, or is that something that it's more just a personal thing?
Just like design skills and like yeah, I mean definitely learn like fundamentals of stuff and
A
like
lot of conceptual stuff that can improve your design skills.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just like stuff that kind of like sits in your brain about like, rule of thirds and like, some color theory stuff and,
Right.
typesetting and like layout and
Right.
like empty space. Like that stuff gets really
Yeah.
pounded into you so yeah, that stuff is really helpful. Like some of that stuff, yeah, I kind of like knew before, but having some formal training is helpful to maybe just help those things sink in a bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might study design more because this is the other thing is, I used to think I want my woodworking thing to be this thriving business, and then I eventually realized I want the freedom of being an artist with the woodworking.
Hmm.
Um, so then I took my work in different directions, and now what I'm doing is I'm building a web design agency, and I have some web design skills, but I'm not like a world class designer,
Hmm.
so I can improve my design skills. But that's another thing where, okay, you want to have your art where you have that kind of freedom, but people even if they're not trying to make money from something, they still can feel blocked by the perceived chore of gaining a skill.
Yeah.
So like, I want to try oil painting,
Hmm.
and maybe Jack Hensby will let me hang out with him more. But I feel kind of intimidated by the skill requirement.
Hmm.
So I'll use this insight into letting myself just play with paint.
Yeah.
And just like Jack said, fail through. You just fail through.
Yeah.
Learning how to use color but I understand that people and I have faced a lot of resistance due to the fear of having to gain a skill and not being good enough.
Right.
Spending a lot of time producing stuff that I won't be proud of.
Right.
So, yeah, what do you think about I mean, like you said, you've dabbled a lot.
Yeah.
In different things, and it's cool that you seem very free from that perfectionistic attitude.
Right.
Of wanting to have one thing that you have.
Yeah.
Perfect skill over.
Yeah. I think I was influenced by a few people when I was a kid that were sort of like jack of all trades type people and sort of like bounced around between even like careers and occupations. And I saw a difference between like how exciting that was versus the people that were like, they did one trade their entire lives. And for me, I was like, yeah, I think that would be more suited to me. And so that sort of has always been a big influence on me. And I think also though, like, same as you, like I haven't always been, I'm not like the greatest learner. Like I'm not the greatest, like, I'm not good at like, people that are like, oh, the YouTube, college of YouTube, or, you can learn anything, and they sit down, and I'm just like, I can't do it, man. Like I just can't, I can't, I just don't care after a certain point. And especially when it comes to art, it's like, why am I think the questions of like, why am I doing this come to mind. It's like, I think fundamentally, I just don't want to go through the work of doing the skill as much as I want to just like play with whatever it is. And so like, there is a flaw in there, because I'd be even better if I just could learn the skills. But I think I just have, um, I don't know. I think I also have a resistance to like learning, and this all could just be bullshit that I have in my brain to like keep me in this like lazy place. But there's also the side of it that's like, I don't want to be, I don't want to learn these skills and like be like learn it in a very fundamental way and then have that like influence what I'm doing. It's like, it seems almost harder to have a voice in that. There's like, I've always just been more interested in like pushing my voice through like whatever medium I'm doing. I don't know. I've always wanted to be able to do things like extremely well and impressive. But like, that's just not how I end up doing it. And I've kind of shamed myself for that at times, but like,
Yeah.
I think now it's like, the kind of like the goal has changed for me, or I've allowed it to be different than like I thought it was supposed to be.
I think there's something to be said for both approaches. Like building, let's say you want to be a particular kind of musician, so you got to learn the rules and you got to practice.
Yeah.
And mostly imitate what other people have already done with music.
Yeah.
Before you can start breaking the rules. And
for sure.
On the other hand, there's someone who just picks up an instrument and starts playing, and eventually, like, it sounds like jazz. They didn't learn any music theory, but it sounds like jazz.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said for freeing yourself to play so that you'll do it at all.
Yeah.
Instead of constricting yourself to the rules.
Exactly.
And then not doing it.
It's just like whatever the process is that allows you to be productive and continue making stuff, not for the sake of like, must be productive, but just like, that's what's fun about art is like making stuff. So it's kind of about doing that, or at least showing up to like practice it. Yeah. Whatever gets you making stuff, don't shame that and don't try and change that. Like, just accept it. So if you want to learn how to oil paint and you are like obsessed with like learning all those little things, and that's how you continue, then like you're on the right track. Yeah. And if you're constantly hitting your head against the wall about like, oh, I'm not good enough in these tutorials, I can't figure this stuff out, it's like, try something else where you can just like, get something down. Because it like, the thing is, we're all expected to like become masters at something, but like that's not the way art really works. It's like, and it doesn't have to. It works however you want it to work. Whatever makes you productive is what you should be like leaning into, I think.
Yeah, I like that, because when I start a writing project, it's always garbage at first. And most things that I do, it's like it just starts as a rough idea. So, and then you start tumbling it along, and if you keep tumbling it along, it starts to take some kind of form.
Yeah.
And sometimes it becomes something that you didn't think you could have, and you couldn't have done it straight from
exactly.
What
Yeah.
you started with.
Yeah. It starts as like a little seed.
Yeah.
And you have to have like faith that you can actually grow that seed.
And then you're working with forces beyond yourself and
Mm-hmm.
order that is somehow inherent in the realm of ideas.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's such a fun part of it is like always, and I think that's one of the keys for me is like setting deadlines and creating like the outline of a project once you have like, you know, an idea or once you have like the first bit of something.
Mm-hmm.
It was like with this series, like I started with one piece, it completely changed form multiple times. It found something that I really liked, and I was like, oh, I want to show like I want to expand this into a bigger project, just so that I'm productive, just so that I have something to do, something to continue to like push for.
Yeah.
And just got this space booked for May, and then was like, okay, now I have to, and then like next thing you know, it's like months and months of just like um, just having these moments of like kind of sometimes grinding and sometimes having like aha moments where you're like, oh man, like this is it. It kind of happened again, and then that happens over and over, and then you're like, okay, I think this system works. Like I think I can trust this process, and then and because something's coming out of it, and like that's worth celebrating.
Somewhat, I guess apparently Nietzsche said something like, the goal of the musician isn't the end of the song or something, but then at the same time, the song wouldn't happen with, like, you wouldn't write the song without the goal of it being written.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a funny thing where, like, a lot of people think the goal is the point. You want to get to the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more like the goal is the thing that gives enough tension.
Yeah, it's the 10%.
To make the process. Yeah, it's the
exactly.
10%.
Yeah.
So if the 90% is the process, it makes me think of our conversation at the cafe before we started recording about like existential despair and pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Because you don't get rid of the grand mystery and like the treachery of life. We're all thrown into the same, we all have the same thrownness into the mystery, and it's like if you try to get to the bottom of that. Well, what were we on about? It was sort of like how you find more peace,
but creating
with it instead of being detached from the suffering.
Yeah, right.
Like non-attachment isn't detachment from
the
suffering. You're
right
with it. Okay, this is life. I have pain. I have fears, and I'm mortal.
Mm-hmm.
And I get ill, and there's tragedy, and yet we don't get to some final there's no final destination or way out.
Yeah.
And so what are we looking for? And it seems to be usually, and the neuroscience seems to say, we're not really looking for the destination, because most of the reward is participatory or anticipatory.
Yeah.
You get most of the dopamine on your way to the thing that you think you want.
Yeah.
So it's funny, you could like trick yourself to using that.
Yeah.
And realizing, okay, so I can set these goals.
Yeah.
But not obsess over having to get there.
Yeah, that's huge.
But the purpose they serve is really to pull me along.
Yeah. Yeah. And then people will be like, oh, well, then once you get to the finish line, then you have that hangover of like having it all done and it was just a blip in time. It's like, doesn't that kill your motivation? It's like, well, no, because I didn't do it again.
You just go do it again.
Just go make a new one.
On to the next.
And it's like, that moment can be hard, but like, like for the first handful of art shows, like for most of them, it was like, that was hard. And like, it took a lot of those to like learn, okay, this is like I need to, every time I would notice it and try to learn from it, but it would happen regardless. And now it's like, there's still a bit of it that happens, but like, because I have like tools in my mind that like I'll use, to like prepare for that and keep me focused on the process. It just like alleviates some of that. And it definitely helped having like this gallery space for like 4.5 weeks. Cause it was like, if the opening event wasn't what I was hoping it would be, it was still here.
Yeah.
And people could still come see it. And it was like this extended thing.
Yeah.
So it's still like, it really helped with it, but it's also like it still wasn't a one night event. So it's not like I'm through the woods of dealing with that. It's just um, it's working so far, and I think it works well enough to be like, okay, well, I understand what's happening, and I understand that, like you said, I need to keep that tension and set up the next one, and it's about the process of it, and it's just so worth continuing doing that, despite like the weirdness of sharing. And I've talked to a lot of like friends of mine that are musicians about this and like performers, and it's a little different for them. Like having to like because I don't really perform, right? So it's like sure I got to talk about the art with people and kind of host, and I'm not really great at doing that, but like um it's not like I'm singing songs that I wrote about my heartbreak on stage and then being like, yeah, let's do this again. Like it's a very different thing. So it's like it doesn't always translate to every type of like finish line, I guess. But I think finding whatever finish line you feel comfortable enough presenting is kind of like where you wanna live.
Yeah. Well, I like that we ended up here because I wanted to ask you because I experienced that very same thing, like with Ritual Madness. All this effort for like 5 weeks to run it, and then everyone had a great night.
Yeah.
And then in the next morning, I look around the space and it's over.
Yeah.
It's done.
Mm-hmm.
Artists are coming to pick up their stuff, and I'm turning my home back into a normal home. But it's almost like that very first next day or next couple days.
Mm-hmm.
It's a stronger feeling of that. But later, the memories are cherished.
Yeah.
Future conversations come up, and then it inspires later things. But it's the transience of life. So I almost feel like it prepares me a little bit for my anxiety about mortality too, because that I don't know what happens when I die, but sometimes I'm like, well, what is the point? Life is cool. Life is so cool, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
Even though there's suffering, it's also beautiful and so incredible.
Yeah.
And okay, all the meaning I can make, it's just going to be gone.
Yeah.
And so, well, yeah, I guess probably so.
Yeah.
But here we are in the present moment.
Yeah.
So
enjoy it.
What else? What's ever been happening other than think the present is passing into the past?
Yeah.
It's always so
true.
Jesse is never, just some static.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Entity. Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Well, I'm encouraged by these realizations because I feel like I've been soaking in this kind of mentality over the last year or so.
Yeah.
Where it's like, all right, I just want to enjoy life, and money and results and all that serve certain purposes and goals. But at the end of the day, yeah, what's it all about, and what's it for?
Yeah.
And
it's about the process.
Yeah, and when I'm frustrated, I'm like, there's times where I'm like, oh, I wanted this to be a business, and I'm like trying to pump out Oakmoss hardwood wallets because I need income.
Right.
It's like, wait, I thought I enjoyed woodworking.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's like, I should just have a job.
Yeah.
And so then I did that instead.
Yeah.
And I would recommend that to people.
Yeah, me too.
Like, don't try to make your art your career.
Yeah.
And if you do want to,
make sure you really thought it out.
Make sure you've thought it out and be okay with the sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you maybe could make a bunch of money, or maybe you won't make that much. So for me, like, because I have financial goals that are larger, I'm doing the web design. I'm doing other stuff that I want to make into a business.
Yeah.
And there's some creativity there, but it's okay if it's just a work sometimes.
Yeah.
Whereas my art, it's like, I don't want woodworking to ever feel like just a chore.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too about making your whole life art and like filling that like job position with your art is that it's pretty helpful to have life experiences that fuel your art. Right. And if all you're doing is hitting the grindstone and like, then you might end up being a little one note, or you might end up feeling like, something's missing. And like, it depends on what you're doing. But to me, like, my writing, for example, is like so fueled by my friends, my friendships, and like the jokes and the bits that we do, and like the constant fooling around and the constant like, I notice something on the street or someone says something, or like I'm like a sponge for that stuff, and my notes is like
some of my early jobs I justified because I had the writer I hadn't done a lot of writing yet.
Mm-hmm.
I was encouraged by some teachers, but I had the identity of being a writer. So when I worked at a pizza restaurant or a McDonald's or wherever and hated it, I would sort of still be able to justify it a bit as a chapter of my life, because I'm like, here's my chance to see this corner of reality in detail.
Totally.
And what are these types of people really like?
Yeah, totally.
So
but those are important, really important. Like, no matter where you are or what that position is, like, your perspective based on where you are is super important and super like beneficial for your art. So as long as you're, I don't know. I just think that's another like kind of hidden thing about, being like, okay, let me focus everything on my art. It's like, okay, well, like, I hope like, I hope the one thing that you're going to be making art about is you have that dialed in.
Right.
I mean, that's too, like, a derivative, but it's like.
Well, I always envied people like writers who figured out a way to, like, travel 6 months of the year.
Right.
And not write. Just,
soak in experiences.
Yeah. Maybe make notes, but.
Yeah.
And then spend 6 months, like, extremely disciplined.
Yeah.
Put out something that's going to profit them. So that's kind of a dream.
Yeah.
But, just because 9 to 5s for 12 months a year is a real drag. But
yeah.
It's all about setting up your life in a way that is, manageable enough to let you enjoy some playtime, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Work can suck, but
yeah, I think also like my sort of mindset about my art practice, or like, I often get caught up in thoughts about like, oh, where am I going? Like what's my goal? And like, even though I have like pretty clear established goals about like what my art practice looks like, there's still times where, I get influenced by like, or I'm like, oh, I should be getting some money back for all of this time and materials. And so I'm like, oh, I need to be, and then it's just like, well, like that flies in the face of like what I'm trying to do. And like, I'd much rather like just explore whatever I want to explore and grow my voice in whatever I'm doing in a really authentic way. And then, if the right person sees it and presents the right kind of opportunity, then like my art's actually ready for that, hopefully at that time, versus like, trying to put yourself out there all the time and trying to like market yourself and get yourself into like seen by all kinds of people before you're even like ready to do that. It's like you're probably going to get pigeonholed or something. So I don't know. Again, it might just be a coping mechanism for me to, stay small with what I'm doing. But it's like I'd just rather spend all that energy focusing on like the fun side of it.
Yeah.
And like, yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like this podcast for me is a good balance. I'm going to have fun talking to artists, and it might evolve into something that's, a specific enough sort of niche that's like, here's the audience, and there's a big enough audience that a sponsor wants to pay me or whatever. But I want it to stay fun, and I think a lot of people talk about starting a podcast for like years on end, and they're like, when I'm ready, I'll do it. And so I'm like, well, fine. I have a smartphone and a laptop and a microphone. I'll start a podcast. And maybe the first few episodes will be all shoddy and silly and no good and get 10 views. Or maybe some of them, because they're so unrestricted and playful, maybe they'll be some of the best ones. And later I'll find myself pigeonholed
Right.
and trying to find something new
It
again.
seems to happen to the best of us.
I think so.
Yeah.
We're habitual creatures.
Yeah.
Once something works, we
Yeah.
like to do it again.
Yeah.
And we don't like to do what doesn't work and be seen doing it.
Yeah.
Not working.
It's true.
Humiliated.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, if this gets more than 10 views, then awesome.
Yeah.
And it might be that later, if I keep doing this and the podcast grows, people will look back on earlier ones. What'd you change, Jesse?
Yeah.
You're sold out, man.
Where's the clipboard?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I should be absolutely humiliated that I'm using this clipboard right now.
Yeah.
It's completely embarrassing.
Yeah.
I should have all these questions perfectly in my
I've
head.
never seen a podcast use a clipboard like this.
It's pretty sad.
Yeah.
It's pitiful. So, what is art? No. You answered that. No, I do have a couple more kind of structured questions here.
Sure.
I didn't ask much about your artistic influences. You've said you've had a few good influences, and so creators who influenced you, and also what about teachers or encouragement in your path?
Let's. I would say. I would say. I don't have like a whole lot of like creators on like the top of my list that like have directly influenced me. You know, most of my friends that are artists, like they can like list. I don't really consume a lot of art with like, I don't know. It's such a hard question for me for some reason.
I can relate to that.
You know,
like I like movies, and people ask my favorite movies, and I can't answer it.
Yeah, well, I would say like one thing is that like The Onion and Clickhole have been like big for my writing. I think.
Okay.
But at the same time, it kind of like. It wasn't like a direct influence.
You were just already a sarcastic guy.
Yeah, and so then like and I found that and was like, oh, like this is sort of like what I'm doing, and then I think it became more of an influence as like I digested more of it. But like the tone of like absurdity sometimes is very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean with design stuff, like there's I don't know, I just kind of like find stuff that I like that influences me for like a period. And then like I don't always like remember what it was. Or I try to like because I don't know, I'm very like particular about keeping my like scope limited with things so that like I don't get like too overly influenced by things.
Yeah.
Like it still happens. I still am influenced a lot, but I, you know, I don't know. I don't have like a huge repertoire of things to pull from because I'm not like in a lot of ways I'm not like a fine art nerd or like I don't read, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like I just kind of fly by the seat of my pants most of the time. But yeah, I mean, I've also had like a lot of teachers and professors that have been like really encouraging though. That have like, you know, yeah, like, you know, made me feel like I'm on a good path and like have helped me and like I had some professors like help me with the design and the print side of this book.
Yeah.
That was like super helpful and stuff. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Just like wish I had a better answer for that, but yeah.
No, it's okay. Personally, I feel very lucky. Like I had parents who encouraged my weird creative adventures and teachers who came along and said, keep writing.
Mm-hmm.
And like magic was part of my creative journey was getting into performing magic, and I had a mentor come along, and not every 10-year-old has parents who say, yeah, learn to do magic.
Right.
So
true.
Just being encouraged to experiment.
Yeah.
And that's where I guess my advice for people mostly comes down to. But I want to know, you've offered a lot in this conversation about overcoming creative resistance, I think.
Hmm.
But let's say someone comes to you and just says, I've always admired artists, and I wish I could paint, or
Mm-hmm.
wish I could make music, or do something, but I'm just not someone who can do that. I wish I could.
Right.
Or maybe a little less conviction in the doubt. Maybe they're asking you for advice.
Right.
And wanting to know, like, how do I get rid of all this feeling that that's not who I am and I can't do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Come on, the deep answers.
Yeah. Come on. Yeah. I mean, I think it's tricky because, like, if you haven't been doing it, like since you were a kid, then it's going to be a lot harder. And it's going to be a little bit like hard to give advice, or like, I mean, I can give you practical advice, but I think the thing is like people have, it's all about breaking the self-doubt that's in their mind. So it's like, I can tell you, do this and like try this and, set yourself up for success by doing this, like, but really what it comes down to is like, they don't believe that they can do it. And they don't believe that like they have anything worth sharing. And they might not. But that's not like the first step, right? It's like when you think about a kid doing art, it's like it doesn't matter what he's doing. It's like it matters that they're engaging with it and they're creating something. They're bringing something from nothing into something. And that's what's cool about it. And that's like what is exciting about creating art. And so people think that they're supposed to be really good at stuff right away, and they think that if they want to try something and if they don't succeed, then they're not meant to do it, or they're human trash. And it's those mindsets and things like that that are the real block for people, and especially if you haven't been doing it since you were a kid. I think like those things are going to be really big, like to get over. So there's no real advice that I could give practically that would be enough to like get over that, because you might be excited about what I have to say and then you go do it and then all those things are there and you've probably done that many times. So, it has to do with like changing what you think art has to be and, bringing it back to a more childlike wonder, I think, and starting from that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's good.
Nailed it.
Good attitude to close on here. So
cool.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, dude.
Very fun.
Thank you. That was great.
We'll do more creative, fun stuff soon.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks for listening to the Unblocked Creators Podcast. This episode was with Ty Martens, Abbotsford multimedia artist. If you enjoyed that and would like to see some of his work, go check him out at Ty Martens Art on Instagram or tymartens.substack.com to read his wild, hilarious writing. That's Martens with an E, not an I. If you'd like to support the Unblocked Creators Podcast, as you can tell, we do need some upgrades for camera equipment and microphones. You can go to oakmoss.ca and purchase an Oakmoss wooden wallet. One of a kind, highly loved, very unique, beautiful wallet. I love mine, and most of my friends have wooden wallets from Oakmoss, and they love them too. Eventually, we might take on an actual sponsor, but for now, I'll just keep plugging Oakmoss. Otherwise, you can also support the show by going to stan.store/oakmoss and clicking on Buy Me a Coffee. If you'd like to submit a small monthly contribution, which you could stop at any time, that would go a long way to helping me get this thing started. I do have some fees to pay for various subscriptions, and editing software costs money, and I do need to get some upgraded equipment. So I appreciate you bearing with me in these early stages and being with me from the beginning of this exciting new journey, and can't wait for you to see all the exciting other guests that I have in store for you in the coming weeks. So, see you next week.